Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This is where we really roll up our sleeves, take the source material you send us, and just dig in.
Yeah, we try to pull out the key insights, the surprising bits, maybe those aha moments.
Basically, giving you the shortcut, helping you get informed on a topic without wading through everything yourself.
Exactly. Think of us as guides, helping you navigate, connect the dots, and see what's really significant in the material you share for each deep dive.
And today, we are diving deep into something pretty fascinating. It's an experience a lot of people might relate to, actually, captured in source material you shared from an episode called Mantled but Misunderstood.
Mantled but misunderstood. The core idea here, the source, really explores this unique tension. It's about feeling, profoundly seen or marked by, well, what it calls heaven.
Okay.
But at the very same time, experiencing just significant misunderstanding from other people, sometimes even in places you'd least expect it, like spiritual communities.
Wow, that tension itself feels really potent. So our mission today is to unpack what this source says about it, understand why it happens according to this material anyway,
Right.
look at the examples it uses, and maybe most importantly, explore how the source suggests you navigate that whole experience constructively.
It's a dynamic the source really paints as incredibly formative.
Yeah.
Something that changes you.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump right into that core idea then. The source introduces this really powerful concept. You can be marked, maybe anointed by God. It uses the term mantled.
Mantle.
And yet, even with that, you can be completely mistaken, completely misunderstood by the people right around you.
Yes, and the source gives this really vivid picture right away. A personal story, actually. Someone weeping on a beach.
Okay.
Not loud crying, just quiet sobs. Feeling the weight of the word, as it puts it. And the key feeling. Realizing there was no audience but heaven.
Wow.
And tied to that, this feeling of being misidentified in sacred places.
Misidentified in sacred places. That phrase really hits home, doesn't it? It's not just like everyday social awkwardness.
No.
It's feeling unseen or misread specifically, where you might expect some kind of connection or understanding, especially related to what you feel you carry spiritually.
Exactly. And the source frames this whole situation, this being mantled but misunderstood, as a major crossroads. It says it will either refine you or cause you to retreat.
So no middle ground, really. It forces a response.
That's the idea. It puts the stakes right up front. It's not passive. It demands something from you, and how you respond shapes your journey.
Okay, so given this tension, the next logical question the source tackles is, why? Why does this misunderstanding even happen? What reasons does the material offer?
It gives a few really insightful angles. One is almost physical. It says, when you carry something heavy, it moves differently.
Okay, like the weight changes your posture, your presence.
Kind of, yeah. The idea is that the significance, the weight of this mantle, it inherently changes how you show up, how you interact. And that difference, it's noticeable.
And it's that difference that causes the friction, the misunderstanding.
Precisely. The source explains that this different way of moving, this sort of heaviness, it doesn't make sense to the casual.
Right. Someone just looking on the surface isn't going to get the depth or why you might seem intense, maybe, or different.
Exactly. And it goes deeper than just not making sense. The source says it can actually be confrontational. It says it offends the carnal.
Offends the carnal.
And disrupts the comfortable.
So what you carry isn't just different, it can actually challenge how other people see things, their perspectives, maybe what the source calls the carnal view, like the more surface level or worldly way of seeing.
Or just the status quo people are used to. It shakes things up.
Yeah.
And that can lead to active resistance, or misinterpretation, not just someone passively not getting it.
Okay, this is where the source brings in some really potent examples to illustrate this pattern. Starting with Hannah from 1 Samuel chapter 1. It's a familiar story for many, but the analysis here is quite sharp.
Yeah, Hannah's story is used to show a misread posture. The source describes her praying in her heart. Her lips are moving, but no sounds coming out.
Silent prayer, deep anguish. And Eli, the priest, he walks by and just completely misreads the whole thing.
Totally. He assumes she's a drunken woman.
Which the source points out is the complete opposite of the truth. She wasn't drunk at all. She was, as the source vividly puts it, drenched in the anguish of a prophet's womb.
That phrasing.
Wow.
Travailing, it says. Like this intense spiritual labor to birth a prophet through her prayer.
That reframing is so important, and the source makes this critical point. The priest, Eli, someone you'd think should have discernment in a sacred space.
Right.
He misidentified her because her posture didn't match his pattern. Her groaner didn't fit his grid.
It wasn't just an oops, an innocent mistake. The source presents it as a failure of discernment, a kind of blindness to something profound happening right in front of him, just because it didn't look like what he expected spiritual expression to look like.
And the source doesn't stop there. It gives another example, Huldah, which is also fascinating because it highlights this dynamic in a slightly different way.
Huldah's story, also Old Testament. It shows how someone who is recognized by heaven might be completely overlooked by people. Remember when King Josiah found the book of the law and needed a word from God? Who did they go to?
And the source makes a point of who they didn't go to initially. Not the big names, right? Not Jeremiah or Zephaniah, the well-known prophets.
Exactly. They went to Huldah. The source describes her as a woman who didn't have public fame, but carried private fire.
Private fire, I like that. So the source concludes about Huldah. Her word was clearly from God. It was undeniable.
Yes.
But she herself remained still uncelebrated in the wider public eye.
And this connects directly to a core pattern the source keeps highlighting. The mantle will always be recognized by heaven before it's validated by men.
So heaven's recognition comes first. Human validation might follow, or it might not, but it's secondary.
Precisely. Heaven sees it. That's the primary reality according to this source.
Okay, let's circle back to that personal story from the source, the one on the beach.
Okay.
It feels like such a modern echo of these ancient stories, you know?
It really does. Standing there barefoot in the water, eyes closed, hands up. A really deep personal moment.
And then the onlookers. The source mentions a couple walking by, and they whispered, they watched, they didn't understand.
Yeah, and the feeling described is that sting. The sting that even in my private surrender, I could still be a spectacle.
Oof, that vulnerability, right? Being seen in that raw spiritual moment and just having it totally misread or even mocked.
But the source immediately pivots.
Yeah.
It offers this powerful counter perspective to feeling like a spectacle. It says, your posture may confuse people, but it commands heaven.
Okay, that shifts everything.
Totally. It pulls the focus away from the human observers entirely. The message becomes basically, let them wonder, let them whisper, let them walk past.
Because the point isn't to make sense to them.
Exactly. The source says the purpose isn't to make sense, it's to make impact. Impact in the unseen realm, connection with heaven. That's the focus.
Okay, so if you, listening, find yourself in this kind of situation, carrying something significant, feeling understood by heaven, but just constantly misunderstood by people, how does the source say you should respond? It actually gets pretty practical here.
It does. It gives some direct guidance, and it specifically names people like prophet, apostle, watchman, intercessor, basically, those feeling a specific calling or weight.
And the first command is pretty strong. Don't shrink back to comfort.
Right. The temptation is obviously to just fade into the background when it gets uncomfortable, isn't it?
Totally. But the source contrasts that. It says you're called to blaze, not blend. Don't water yourself down to fit in.
Exactly. Blaze, not blend. And it balances that fire with some wisdom for your inner life, too. Guard your heart, but don't harden it.
Ah, that's crucial. Protect yourself from the hurt, yes. But don't let bitterness or cynicism take over because people misunderstand.
And it even suggests using the misunderstanding itself. Let their misunderstanding refine your humility, not breed bitterness.
So how you process it can actually shape your character for the better, turn it into fuel for humility.
Yeah. And another key instruction, stay obedient even when it's awkward. Keep doing what you feel called to do, even if the way people see it or don't see it makes you really uncomfortable.
There's also some real reassurance packed in here, like you don't need mass approval to release a God-backed word.
Right. And also, let God defend your sound. You don't have to constantly be explaining yourself or proving the validity of what you carry.
The source is pretty clear. Heaven knows what he placed in you. You don't need to prove it to everybody else. And I really appreciated the practical discernment piece too. It says, discern who's sent to receive you and who's just spectating.
Using those strong biblical metaphors. Don't cast your pearls among swine. Don't waste your oil. Basically, be wise. Be discerning about who you share the deep stuff with.
That point about discernment leads right into something else really critical. The source addresses the danger of just retreating, choosing silence, because being misunderstood is just too hard.
Yes, exactly. For anyone listening who's maybe withdrawn, gone quiet because it just feels easier than being constantly misread, the source has a very direct, almost challenging statement.
What is it?
It says, Your silence is suffocating the word that I've placed in your belly.
Yeah, wow, that's direct. It frames silence not as peace, but as suffocation.
And it reframes the whole purpose of the difficulty. The misunderstanding, this source argues, wasn't meant to mute you. It was meant to mature you.
Okay, that's a total game changer in perspective, isn't it? The hardship isn't a sign you're wrong or failing. It's actually part of a refining, a maturing process.
Exactly. And so the source issues this clear call to action.
Yeah.
Get up, speak again, weep again, watch again. Basically, re-engage. Don't stay withdrawn.
And it follows that with this powerful identity statement. Because I've made you a voice, not an echo.
You're meant to originate, to speak what's given to you, not just repeat what's already being said or accepted.
This brings us to what feels like a really foundational principle the source emphasizes throughout. God's perspective in all this. It argues pretty strongly that God always sees what others miss.
It circles back to those examples we talked about, right?
Yeah.
To really drive the point home. God saw Hannah's tears when Eli saw drunkenness.
Right. Human eyes saw surface behavior. Divine sight saw the deep spiritual reality underneath.
God saw David's heart when his brother saw a shepherd boy. People saw the outward stuff, the resume, basically. God saw the inner character, the destiny.
And Huldah?
And God saw Huldah's authority when others didn't even mention her name, her true standing, her anointing. God recognized it even without any public fame.
And then the source just brings it right back to you, the listener. It says, and God sees you. It even lists specifics from the source material. Your submission, your warfare, your tears.
All those unseen things, the private struggles, the quiet choices to obey, the battles nobody else knows about.
It really acknowledges that reality. No one claps for your obedience when no one's watching.
Yeah, that could feel lonely. But then it offers this incredibly powerful reframe. Listen to this. You are not hidden from God. You are hidden by God for such a time as this.
Hidden by God, not from God. That's huge. So the lack of visibility isn't abandonment. It's not being overlooked by heaven. It could actually be intentional positioning, a kind of covering for a specific purpose or timing.
That's the perspective offered, yes. And building on that understanding, the source then gives some really specific, active ways you can sort of transform the experience of being misunderstood or rejected.
Okay, yeah, turning the negative into something productive. What are they?
First, turn your rejection into revelation. And the prompt it gives is to ask God. Ask our Abba, it says, what the misunderstanding is training in you.
So use the pain point as a catalyst for learning, for deeper insight into yourself and your calling.
Exactly. Second, turn isolation into intercession. If the misunderstanding kind of pushes you into solitude, don't just sit there. Use that private time to sharpen your sound, deepen your connection, your prayer, your voice.
Okay, rejection into revelation, isolation into intercession. What's the third?
Third, turn your wounds into weapons. And the logic here, according to the source, is pretty fascinating. It says, every misjudgment is proof you carry something uncommon.
Wow. So the moments that hurt the most aren't proof you're failing. They're actually evidence that you possess something unique, something different.
That's the argument. The very fact that you're being misjudged points to the reality that you're not fitting the common mold.
And this ties right back into a core identity statement we find in the source material. Because you were never meant to be normal.
Right. It goes on. You were called to disturb the systems and rebuild altars.
So that's why you face misunderstanding. Because what you carry, by its nature, is meant to challenge the status quo, to shake things up, to bring change.
Which is rarely comfortable or easily understood at first glance.
Makes sense. So as we kind of bring this deep dive toward a close, the source offers this really powerful concluding feeling, almost like a declaration or an affirmation based on everything we've discussed.
It does. It starts with gratitude for the mantle itself, acknowledging the challenges, saying even when it's misunderstood, it affirms the validity of that deep inner groan that doesn't fit man's grid.
And it includes this refusal, this kind of commitment not to shrink back anymore. We will no longer apologize for our sound. We will no longer shrink to avoid stares.
Yeah, taking a stand. And the desired outcome it paints is letting the fire burn within, brighter than the rejection around, letting our yes echo under their no.
Wow, that's powerful imagery. And the ultimate goal, as laid out in the source, to be unshakable in calling, unoffended in consecration, and unwavering in obedience.
Quite the aspiration. And the final anchoring truth that makes that stance possible, according to this source.
Let me guess. It comes back to heaven's perspective.
You got it. Because we are mantled even when they don't understand. Heaven does. and that's enough.
That really is a deeply resonant way to unpack this source material. We've journeyed from that core tension, understood by heaven, misunderstood by people, explored the why behind it according to the source, looked at Hannah and Huldah.
Wrestled with that sting of being a spectacle even in private moments.
Right, and importantly, drawn out that practical wisdom and those transformative ways to respond that the source offers.
Yeah, I think the central takeaway from this material really is
Yeah.
that myth understanding. It's not necessarily a sign you're hidden from God or that you've done something wrong. It's often an indicator you carry something uncommon. Maybe you're even hidden by God for a reason, for a season. And that tension, that friction, it's meant to mature you, not mute you. Ultimately, it's heaven's validation that counts.
So here's something to think about, drawing from this source. How does that idea that you were, as it puts it, never meant to be normal, that you were called to disturb systems and rebuild altars, how might that change the way you view or react to the misunderstanding you might be facing?
And maybe just take a moment, too, to reflect on which piece of that practical advice, that wisdom from the source, really resonated with you right now in your own situation.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. We really hope exploring this source material has offered some valuable insights.
Until next time.